I'm curious with all the conflict in the world, all the challenges, the wars, all the things that are going on that are really important to mankind and humans across the globe. How do you see AI and technology impacting, the goal of peace in this world?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I
Um,
know it doesn't, it could just be a concept that we explore. I'm curious because I see technology playing such an important role, and now I know how technology. I'll help talk through it so we can get to
that's good.
a thought process. I'm just curious because I see technology impacting the way the wars are fought today, significantly different than what we envisioned when we go back in history and look at World War II.
So,
But
so,
how does it help the other way?
so, I mean, one way to maybe think about it is how has computers affected world peace or just big stories around the world? Because in a very obvious way, AI is taking that a step further. So on the one hand, computers has done a lot of good. It's brought communities together. Suddenly you feel much closer to people you've never met all over the world. You're sharing stories, you're sharing information. It's also helped sort of alert. So if something happens today, you're much more likely that a computer will pick up on some signal and that gets routed much faster, and people can come and sort of help you. And even just like sharing information of somebody who has a disease on one side of the world and they found out that they have and I can give more and more examples along those lines. It's also helped in a large way, sort of sometimes democracies to try and sort of get an edge or monitor bank transfers and things like that, and things that in the past were very difficult. It helps sort of reduce friction of financial systems. So there's tons of good things. And at the same time, I could name a list which is just as long, whether it's of disinformation and who knows what. So I think in a very real way, AI is going to do both. AI presents a real opportunity to take some of the good things even further. And at the same time, it could be used, and it probably will also be used in some negative ways. Um, I am a generally optimistic and hopeful person. And so I will say that I am not particularly worried about an AI turning into some robot that turns into something that takes over the world and threatens all of us. There's definitely a fear of being too reliant on AI. And there's companies, some of them we've invested in, some of them we've partnered with, which is like AI that monitors AI and stops it doing biases and skews and all that type of stuff. And there'll probably be some stories that people were like, I told you this was going to be terrible and the rest of it. But at the same time, in the 80s, when manufacturers were being put out of business because of machines, and they said soon the machines are going to take over, broadly, we're much happier today that you can buy a T-shirt for a few dollars and that you can get something delivered, like you mentioned, all the way to your house, and that things are being sort of produced at a very high level, such as cars. So, like, I think we're overall quite happy with these so-called machines. So I think AI will be both good and bad, and my hope is much more good than bad.
If we look at it from the angle of the education component and how you could take someone earning $1,000 a month to $5,000 to $7,000 a month in under a year and allow them to change their lives, it can impact significantly on the earning potential. It also can cheapen the goods on a dramatic level because you can get sharper. If the computers are helping, to your point, find the next mountain in a better way constantly, and they're searching for better ways to scale a process, it's going to eventually, hopefully, reduce the price of goods and allow the inflationary challenges that people feel to maybe subside to some degree.
100%. I don't think that's a question. I think that will definitely happen. Like if we want
Yeah.
to take a finance angle at this, like so think about your average S&P 500 or 5,000 company. They've probably spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, writing just the software code lines that they now put in goodwill or brand or wherever they're putting that in. And that, if was built today, would probably cost under 10% to replicate. So I'm just taking that one obvious example, and there's a number of them as well. And that will naturally bring down the cost of goods and make things cheaper. It would take a cycle or two to get that out, but that's clearly going to happen.
Well, I geek out on all this stuff because I love, my whole path in life is if I can find a better way, then I need to find a better way. And it's sometimes, your greatest strengths turned up too loud or your blind spots. So for me, if I'm constantly searching for a better way, my wife and I talk about this all the time. I'm thinking 3 moves ahead. And sometimes you just need to be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, not what you're going to have for dinner 3 nights from now. So I understand it can be a challenge, but I just got back from a group I'm a member of called the Genius Network out of Scottsdale, Arizona, with a bunch of entrepreneurs and leaders across the world, really. And it was so interesting. We had a company there that does newsletters, and their AI run newsletters, and everything that's been mechanical and monotonous and challenging is now done automatically for you. Another one is a clone, and it basically clones you take all of your persona and plug it in, and the clone can answer internal questions for your team. It can coach people with your voice, with your mentality, with the way that your books. It's super interesting to think of ways to help more people. So I think of it as impact, and we talked about this in the beginning. I think of it from the impact that you can make. And every time you can elevate your stage and you could create a larger impact on the world, it's really powerful. And I see that in AI. And I think I'm like you. I just want to see the optimistic side of it. I want to lean on positivity, not negativity here.
Yeah, so one of my favorite stories that I came across from researching for the book was, as weird as it sounds, I think it was in Indonesia, if I remember correctly. It was a small village that was being attacked by monkeys. And basically what was happening is that these monkeys would come in to the village and steal their food and run away. And the villagers didn't know what to do to try and trap these monkeys. And then they came up with this trap. And the idea of the trap was a small rock, or I think it was a coconut, that was sort of tied to the ground. And they made a hole, a relatively small hole in the coconut, where the monkey could fit its empty hand into the hole. And there was a nut that they knew the monkey would want. But the problem for the monkey was, once he put his empty hand in and grabbed the nut and made a fist, he couldn't get his hand back out. And so they could go off to the field and do whatever they were doing. They left these traps, and they would come back hours later to see then monkeys screaming with their hands stuck in the coconut, holding this nut. And the funny thing about it is, like, we humans will think about this and say, oh, these monkeys are so dumb. They could clearly just drop the nut and escape. But the monkey is not able to understand that it's better off giving up on the nut to get to a higher place, being a free monkey. Clearly, trapped monkey with a nut is not as good as free monkey without a nut. But the monkey is not capable of understanding that it needs to go down to give something up to get to a better point. All the monkey thinks is, I'm a monkey with a nut trapped, and if I let go of it, I'm monkey trapped without nut. So he can't conquer. But the reality is, us humans, we do the same thing the whole time. We are constantly in businesses or in different endeavors of our lives where we are holding on to some type of nut. Just take the examples we've spoken about. In Fosbury, when they were jumping, the other jumpers weren't thinking about, is there a better way than the scissor jump? In Netflix and Blockbuster, they had to get rid of their DVDs. Yes, it was their core source of income, but that was their nut. And this is a multi-billion-dollar company with probably all the McKinseys and Bain strategists, etc. But they needed to give up. They couldn't give up on their nut. And there's a variety of other stories that we go through where we find that us humans, and you talked about this a lot to your point of breaking things or being willing to give up on something to build it better. And very, very often we find ourselves each holding a nut and asking ourselves, what nut are we holding that we have to let go of, is sometimes just the beginning of finding something dramatically better, to your point, to make a real impact.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.